Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into something kind of unsettling? Today, we're tackling the question, can humans be hacked?
Ooh, yeah. It's a question that's definitely got some bite to it.
Yeah.
And as we dig into this article by Vikas Cohen, we'll see why it kind of ruffles some feathers.
Right away, the article drops this intense phrase, hackable cattle.
Oh, okay.
That's a little creepy. What's Cohen trying to say here?
Well, it's like a really strong image, and it gets at what Cohen sees as like the possible danger of
It's just
transhumanism.
humanism.
Right, that whole movement to boost human abilities with tech. He's suggesting maybe we're not becoming superhuman, but actually easier to control as we chase these upgrades.
So is Cohen saying that all this tech is actually making us less free?
Yeah, that's a big chunk of his argument.
Yeah.
And he kind of breaks it down a few ways. First, there's that whole data thing.
Yeah.
Every click, every Google search we make feeds these algorithms that learn our stuff and predict how we'll act.
Okay, we've all heard about data harvesting. What makes Cohen's take on this different?
He says it's gone way beyond targeted ads now. It's about messing with our wants, our choices, even our beliefs. He thinks algorithms are getting so good, they can make us think we're choosing freely while they're nudging us in certain directions.
Hmm. Kind of like what Yuval Harari talks about, right?
Yeah.
With enough data, algorithms could know us better than we know ourselves.
Exactly. And that brings up some big questions about, are we really calling the shots, or are we becoming, like Cohen says, hackable cattle, predictable and easily manipulated?
This is where I can see why this article might rub some people the wrong way. It's like a hit to our sense of individuality and being in control.
Oh, totally. It challenges what we believe about free will and being human. But Cohen doesn't stop at data. He goes into biohacking and neural influence. And that's where things get even wilder.
Okay, let's break that down. Biohacking, are we talking brain implants and stuff? Sounds like sci-fi to me.
Might sound futuristic, but Cohen says these technologies are closer than we think. He talks about brain-computer interfaces that could boost our thinking abilities, genetic tweaks to make us stronger or healthier, and even the potential for digital consciousness, like uploading our minds to computers.
Whoa. Okay, that's both fascinating and kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
But how does this tie into humans being hacked?
Well, Cohen brings up some serious ethical questions, like who gets access to these bioenhancements? Will they be for everyone, or will they create like a new class system, the enhanced versus the rest of us?
That's a disturbing thought. Imagine some people basically superhuman while others are left behind.
And then there's the question of control. If we can upgrade our brains with tech, who's to say someone couldn't use that tech to mess with our thoughts and actions?
So we could end up with people literally being hacked on a biological level.
That's the worry Cohen's raising. He's not saying it's a sure thing, but he wants us to think about these possibilities before it's too late.
Okay, I'm seeing how this is pushing some buttons. We're talking about some deep questions about what it means to be human. But Cohen doesn't just focus on individuals, right? He also looks at governments and corporations.
Right. He argues that AI and surveillance tech are already being used to control people, and these tools are only getting stronger. He gives examples like facial recognition to track people's movements, social media to manipulate public opinion, even AI systems that could predict and stop dissent before it happens.
This is starting to sound like a dystopian novel. Is Cohen saying democracy is in danger?
He's definitely worried about losing privacy, autonomy, even free will with these powerful technologies.
Yeah.
And he says it's not just happening in dictatorships, it's in democracies too.
So what Cohen is saying is that the line between technological progress and social control is getting blurry.
Exactly, and that's why he's sounding the alarm. He wants us to wake up to the potential dangers of blindly embracing this tech.
So what's the alternative? Give up all tech progress and go live in caves.
No, Cohen's not saying that. He thinks tech can be a good thing. But he's urging us to be more critical, more aware of the downsides, and to fight for safeguards that protect human dignity and autonomy.
Okay, I see why this article is making people think. Even if it's a bit unsettling, it makes us face some hard truths about our relationship with tech and where it's headed.
And that's just the beginning. He goes on to explore some even more controversial stuff, like the potential end of free will and us becoming commodities in the age of data capitalism.
Whoa, okay. Now I gotta hear more.
Yeah.
But let's take a breath and let all this sink in. Where does Cohen go from here?
Well, after laying out all the dangers, he actually gives a surprisingly optimistic view on how we can fight back and reclaim our autonomy.
Phew, good. Because I was starting to feel a little helpless there. So where does he suggest we start?
One of his big points is education and digital literacy. He says we need to understand how these systems work if we want to have any shot at controlling them.
So we can't just be aware of the problem. We need to get in there and understand the nuts and bolts of how this tech works.
Exactly. We got to learn about algorithms, data collection, and how our information is being used and maybe even manipulated. He even says this kind of education should start young.
Makes sense. Kids are growing up in a world where tech is everywhere. It's like learning a new language, the language of the digital age.
Hmm.
But is knowledge enough to fight these powerful forces?
Cohen admits it's not a magic bullet, but he sees it as the first crucial step. He argues the more we get it, the less likely we are to be blindly controlled by it.
Okay, that's a good point. So education is step one. What else does Cohen recommend?
He also really emphasizes strong regulations and oversight, especially for how corporations and governments use these technologies.
But isn't that kind of a long shot? These tech companies are like giants.
Yeah.
Governments really control them?
It's definitely a challenge, but Cohen thinks it's essential. He points out that we already have rules for other industries that can be risky, like drug companies or the food industry, so why not for tech?
I guess that makes sense. But what kind of regulations are we talking about? What would they actually look like?
Cohen throws out a few ideas, like more transparency in how algorithms work, so we understand how they're shaping our online lives and making choices that affect us. He also suggests stricter rules around data collection and giving people more control over their own info.
So it's about shifting the power back to individuals and away from these massive companies that are holding all our data.
Exactly. It's about making sure technology serves humanity, not the other way around.
Okay, I'm with you there. But I gotta admit, I still feel a little overwhelmed. It's like, what can I do to make a difference?
Well, Cohen actually has some practical tips for individuals, too. He encourages us to protect our privacy online, like using strong passwords, being careful about what we share on social media, and even looking into privacy tools like VPNs and encrypted messaging apps.
So it's about being more careful about our digital footprint and taking steps to protect our data.
Exactly. He says we need to become smarter digital citizens, not just passive consumers of technology.
It's like we're all playing this giant online game, but haven't bothered to read the rules or figure out how to protect ourselves.
Yeah. Perfect analogy. And Cohen goes even further. He says we need to think bigger than individual actions and start building new systems that are more aligned with human values.
Okay, now you've got me hooked. What's he thinking?
He talks about the potential of decentralized tech like blockchain and cryptocurrencies to take power away from big institutions and give individuals more control over their data and online experiences.
I've heard of blockchain and crypto, but I don't really get it. Can you explain that a bit?
Sure. Imagine a system where information isn't stored on one server controlled by like Google or Facebook, but spread across a network of computers all over the world. That's basically blockchain. It creates a secure and transparent way to share and check information without needing a central authority.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it.
Yeah.
So instead of our data being controlled by a few big companies, it's more spread out and harder to mess with.
Exactly. And this decentralized idea could be used for all kinds of online stuff, from social media to money systems to even voting.
Wow, that's a pretty radical vision.
Mhm.
But I gotta admit, it's exciting to think about a world where tech is more democratic and less controlled by a few powerful entities.
And Cohen says this shift towards decentralization is already happening. He sees it as a possible way out of that hackable cattle scenario he describes in the article.
So it's not all doom and gloom. There's hope we can take back our autonomy and build a future where tech empowers us instead of controlling us. But this all sounds like a huge task. Where do we even begin?
Cohen doesn't give a simple roadmap, but he says it starts with changing our mindset. We need to move past just being consumers of technology and start seeing ourselves as active participants in shaping it.
So it's about being more conscious and intentional in our choices, not just about what we click on or buy, but about the kind of tech future we want to create.
Exactly. He argues that we need to reclaim our agency and ask some basic questions. What do we care about? What kind of world do we want to live in? And how can we use tech to get there?
Those are big questions, but important ones. And I think Cohen's article makes us start asking them.
He's not giving easy answers, but he is giving a framework for thinking about these issues in a smarter and more nuanced way.
I appreciate that about his approach. It's not about hating tech or rejecting progress. It's about being more thoughtful and intentional in how we use it.
And he reminds us that in the end, the future of technology is up to us. We decide if it becomes a tool for control or for liberation.
This whole conversation has definitely given me a lot to think about. But one thing I'm still struggling with is this idea of free will. If algorithms can predict what we'll do so well, does that mean free will is just a fantasy?
That's a question philosophers have been debating forever, and Cohen doesn't pretend to have the final answer. But he does offer a new way to think about how tech might be changing how we understand free will.
Okay, I'm listening. What does he say?
He says that tech isn't necessarily killing free will, but it is making the things that influence our choices more obvious and possibly easier to manipulate.
Can you give an example?
Sure, think about how social media algorithms customize our news feeds. They show us stuff we're likely to click on based on what we've done and liked before. This creates a bubble that can reinforce what we already believe and stop us from seeing other perspectives.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that. It's like I'm stuck in an echo chamber where everyone agrees with me.
Exactly. And that can make it harder to think for ourselves and make truly independent decisions. We might feel like we're in control, but our choices are being subtly shaped by the information we see.
So it's like our free will is being chipped away by these invisible forces that are choosing what we see online.
That's one way to look at it. And as these algorithms get smarter, the line between persuasion and manipulation gets blurrier.
This is getting a little too real. I'm starting to feel like I need to disconnect and go live in a cabin in the woods.
Haha, I get it. But Cohen wouldn't necessarily say to do that. He believes that technology can be a powerful force for good, but we have to be aware of the potential problems and take steps to fix them.
So it's about finding a balance between embracing new tech and protecting our freedom.
Exactly. And that's going to take a lot of critical thinking, open discussion, and a willingness to challenge the way things are.
I'm definitely feeling more empowered after this conversation, even if it's been a bit of a roller coaster.
That's a good thing. The goal isn't to scare people, but to get them to do something.
I agree. Knowledge is power. Right. The more we understand about this technology, the better we'll be at shaping a future where it helps humanity instead of
Yeah.
controlling us.
And that's a future worth fighting for.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot in this deep dive, and I'm sure our listeners have plenty to think about. But before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your final thoughts on Cohen's article and what it all means for us moving forward.
I think Cohen's article is a powerful wake-up call. It forces us to face some hard truths about our relationship with technology and the potential dangers of just accepting its promises. But it also offers hope. It reminds us that we have the power to shape the future of technology and create a world where it makes our lives better instead of making us less human.
That's a great thought to end on. And I think it's a message we all need to hear right now. So to our listeners, we say stay curious, stay critical, and stay involved in the conversation about how we want to shape the future of technology.
And most importantly, remember that you're not just hackable cattle. You're a human being with the power to make a difference.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've just gone deep into some pretty heavy stuff with Vikas Cohen's article. He paints a kind of dark picture of the future where humans are becoming, like hackable cattle. But before we totally freak out, I want to know what he suggests we can actually do about all this.
Yeah, Cohen's not just a doom and gloom guy.
Yeah.
After laying out all those dangers, he actually offers a surprisingly hopeful view on how we can fight these trends and take back our control.
Okay, good. I started to feel kind of powerless there. So where do we even begin?
Well, one of his key points is all about education and becoming digitally literate. He says we got to understand how these systems actually work if we want to have any hope of controlling them.
So it's not just about knowing there's a problem. We actually got to get under the hood and understand the mechanics of how this tech operates.
Exactly. We got to learn about those algorithms, those data collection practices, how our info is being used and maybe even manipulated. He even suggests this kind of education should start early, with kids.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kids these days are growing up with tech all around them. It's basically like learning a new language, the language of the digital world, but is knowing enough to fight these huge forces.
Cohen admits it's not some magic solution, but he sees it as a really important first step. He argues that the more we understand these systems, the less likely we are to just be blindly controlled by them.
Makes sense. So education step one. What else is on Cohen's list?
He's also big on strong regulations and oversight, especially for how those big corporations and governments use these technologies.
But isn't that kind of a long shot? I mean, these tech giants are super powerful. Can governments really rein them in?
It's a big challenge for sure. But Cohen believes it's absolutely crucial. He points out that we've already got regulations for other industries that can be risky, like pharmaceuticals or food. So why not for the tech world?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. But what kind of regulations are we even talking about? Like, what would those look like?
Well, Cohen throws out some possibilities, like
Right.
forcing more transparency in how those algorithms work so we can actually understand how they're shaping our online experiences and making choices that impact our lives. He also wants stricter rules around data collection and use giving individuals more control over their own personal information.
It's all about shifting the power back to the individual.
Hmm.
Taking it away from those massive corporations that are hoarding all our data.
Right. It's about ensuring that technology is there to serve humanity, not the other way around.
Okay, I'm on board with that. But I gotta say, I'm still feeling a little overwhelmed by all of this. It's like, what can one person even do to make a difference?
Don't worry, Cohen's got some practical tips for us regular folks, too. He wants us to take steps to protect our privacy online. Stuff like using strong passwords, being careful about what we share on social media, and even checking out those privacy tools like VPNs and encrypted messaging apps.
So basically, being more mindful of our digital footprint and taking steps to safeguard our own data.
Exactly. He says we need to become more like savvy digital citizens, not just passively consuming whatever tech throws at us.
It's like we're all playing this giant online game, but we haven't even bothered to read the rule book or figure out how to protect ourselves.
Perfect analogy. But Cohen actually takes it a step further. He says we need to think bigger than just individual actions and start building alternative systems that are more aligned with what we value as humans.
Okay, now you've really got me interested. What does he have in mind?
He talks about the potential of decentralized tech, things like blockchain and cryptocurrencies. He thinks these could help shift power away from those centralized institutions and give individuals more control over their data and their online experiences.
I've heard those buzzwords, blockchain and crypto, but I'll be honest, I don't really understand how it all works. Can you break that down a bit?
Sure. Imagine a system where information isn't just stored on one server controlled by a big company like Google or Facebook, but instead it's distributed across a whole network of computers all over the world. That's essentially what blockchain does. It creates a really secure and transparent way to share and verify information without relying on some central authority.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get the picture. So instead of our data being controlled by a few powerful corporations, it's more spread out, making it way harder to manipulate or exploit.
Exactly. And this whole decentralized approach could be applied to all kinds of online services, from social media platforms to financial systems to even voting systems.
Wow, that's a pretty radical vision. But I gotta admit, it's kind of exciting to imagine a world where tech is more democratic and less controlled by a few powerful entities.
And the cool thing is, Cohen argues that this shift towards decentralization is already happening. He sees it as a potential antidote to that whole hackable cattle scenario he lays out in the article.
So it's not all doom and gloom. There is hope that we can reclaim our autonomy and actually build a future where tech empowers us instead of controlling us. But this all sounds like a massive undertaking. Where do we even begin?
Cohen doesn't really give us a simple roadmap, but he says it all starts with a shift in mindset. We got to move past just being consumers of technology and start seeing ourselves as actively shaping its development and use.
So it's about being more conscious and deliberate in our choices, not just about what we click on or buy, but also about the kind of technological future we actually want to create.
Exactly. He argues that we need to reclaim our agency and start asking those fundamental questions, What do we truly value? What kind of world do we want to live in? And how can we use tech to help us get there?
Those are big questions for sure, but definitely important ones. And I think Cohen's article does a great job of making us start asking them.
He's not offering easy answers, but he is giving us a framework for thinking about these issues in a more critical and nuanced way.
I really appreciate that about his approach. It's not about demonizing technology or rejecting progress. It's about being more thoughtful and intentional in how we engage with it.
And he reminds us that ultimately the future of technology is in our hands. We have the power to decide whether it becomes a tool for control or a tool for liberation.
So we've really dug deep into Vikas Cohen's article, and it's been a wild ride. From data being collected to biohacking, from the idea of free will disappearing to the rise of decentralized tech, it's been quite the journey.
Yeah, we've explored how technology could be making us easier to hack, but we also talked about ways to fight back against that.
It's clear Cohen's not just warning us, he wants us to do something about it. So for our listeners who are feeling fired up and ready to take charge, what concrete steps can they start taking today?
Well, first off, I think Cohen would say just become more aware of your relationship with technology. Take a minute to think about how you use tech, how it makes you feel, and whether it's actually helping you or matching your values.
So like a little digital self-reflection is in order.
Yeah. Ask yourself the hard questions like, how long are you online every day? What are you even looking at online? Is it adding something good to your life or just wasting your time and attention?
And is social media really connecting you with people or just feeding your ego and insecurities? Be honest.
Totally. Once you get a handle on your own digital habits, then you can start making better choices about how you use tech.
Like maybe setting some limits on screen time or
Mm.
being pickier about the apps and platforms you use.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to try out those privacy tools like VPNs, password managers, and encrypted messaging. They can help protect your data and keep you private online.
It's like wearing digital armor to protect yourself from those data-hungry algorithms.
Haha, I love that. But it goes beyond what you do on your own. Cohen also says it's important to work together and push for change as a society.
So how can we make our voices heard and push for a more ethical and human-centered way of thinking about tech?
We'll start by supporting those organizations, fighting for digital rights and privacy. There are some great groups out there doing amazing work to keep tech companies in check and push for better regulations.
And don't forget about voting. Let your elected officials know this matters to you, that you want them to focus on policies that protect our digital freedoms.
For sure. But honestly, the most important thing is to talk about it. Have those conversations with your friends, family, and coworkers about the potential downsides of technology and the need for more ethical and sustainable solutions.
It's like that saying, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. We can't just sit back and passively accept whatever advancements they throw at us. We need to be active in shaping the future we want.
Well said. And remember, this isn't about saying no to all technology. It's about being smart about how we use it and making sure it serves humans, not the other way around.
Cohen's article really drives home the point that we have a choice in this tech revolution. We're not just helpless bystanders. We have the power to choose how we deal with technology and shape the digital world we want.
I think that's a great takeaway. It's not about being afraid of the future, but about seeing the possibilities and working together to create a tech landscape that reflects our values and hopes.
So to our listeners, we say, stay informed, stay involved, and stay hopeful. The future of tech is still being written, and we all have a hand in shaping it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's left you feeling empowered, inspired, and ready to navigate the digital world with more awareness and purpose.
And hey, maybe you'll even inspire others to join the conversation and help us create a more human-centered tech future for everyone.
Now that's the goal. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in.